set up here. Check our camera angle, see who's joining us.
All right.
Hopefully they can hear us through the mask. Right? Hello everybody who's joining us. Give us a minute here to get set up and we'll get y'all squared away here.
Let these sirens pass too.
Yeah, it's Wednesday in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which means tornado siren day. Yeah, turn this volume down. Getting our camera adjusted. Welcome to everyone who's joining us. We're getting some microphones set up and we'll be good. We had those questions. I'll pull those up for us. Alrighty. I think everyone can hear us now. You guys, if you got questions that you want to submit during this time, we'd love to go ahead and have you pop them up. We got some questions ahead of time that were dropped in that we'll go ahead and start answering, but we are live here at the Hasty Bake at the Tulsa Grill Store. I'm here with Kevin Snell. He's going to blush when I say James Beard nominated chef. But Kevin, give us a little bit of your background. Talk loud for that mic, but kind of tell us what you do and why you do it, and yeah.
Well, I'm a chef here locally in Tulsa. I've always been passionate about cooking over wood fire. I grew up in small town Arkansas, and my dad and I are always camping as often as we could and trout fishing and cooking it over fire. And so, just that was a part of my life growing up, and just continue doing it as long as I could.
Yeah, I like it. Kevin creates some of the more creative things that I think we see in the Tulsa food scene. Definitely borrows from some awesome culture stuff. And you are, I guess, kind of in your free time and some catering time and stuff like that, you'll also like to do Argentinian style. You want to give us a quick little rundown on that and what that means and what it's like?
Yeah, so given the background of cooking over campfires, I fell in love with that whole Argentinian style that Francis Mallman really, he just personifies really. But so it's just basically open fire on the ground, and you're either you're grilling over it, or you're using a big flat cast iron piece searing on it, or you're hanging things above it. It's just a lot of different ways to cook, but what you're doing is taking wood fire and making your coals, or you're doing something over the wood fire itself, and it's just a whole range of things. It's a very he has the book called 7 Fires, and those are 7 different methods, and those are just the tip of the iceberg there.
Right. And the idea is using the fire to the versatility that it can be, right? So whether you're cooking hot over a plancha, whether you're catching smoke above it, whether you're using it as kind of an oven bake, like there's all these different tools that you use in that in that environment. Yeah,
it's for me. Another passion is just creating art. I love doing that. I don't do it as often as I want to, but I have a welder at home, and he kind of inspired me to make all these weird contraptions. So we have a big dome that looks like a big bird cage. Yeah. We've got some big planchas. It's just a big piece of 1/2-inch steel with legs that we stick over the fire. And other grills and stuff. But it's just utilizing that fire, different ranges, just like the Hasty Bake works, where you take the fire away from the product. Well, we do that by removing the food higher above it or something like that if we're doing the hanging.
Kind of a very manual Santa Maria style.
Yeah. Very rustic. Very
rustic, I think, is a great word for it. Yeah. And it's time consuming. It's not a quick cook, right?
Yeah. We did a catering last year with Justin from 1907 came and helped me out, and Stephen Lindstrom, he came and helped me out too. And it just doesn't always work like you want it to. I thought these chickens were going to be done. We had them hanging. I was turning them all day,
Well, it was like 25 degrees out that day too,
wasn't it? Cold and raining too, So all those things that, you have to consider that, because it's going to slow your cooking time down, the ambient air temperature, also the cold rain itself coming down on the product, And those chickens didn't get done in time until we had to take them off and actually like cut them down and put them in pans right on the fire.
Right.
But
there's something cool about that too, because you're adapting to you're saying we were going to have this, we got some smoke, and now it's going to be this, and it's kind of fun. I like the community aspect of that because there's multiple people involved. Multiple opinions and cooking styles involved at the same time, but everyone's kind of just hanging out, waiting, enjoying the day. Maybe not enjoying it as much when it's 25 degrees out, but
it was a fun day.
Yeah, for sure. The pictures I saw, I can't say they made me want to be there.
No.
Maybe they made me want to be there on a different day.
It was funny because when I heard the Fire and Grain podcast where Justin went into depth about his terrible camper story, I was like, man, I'm glad he didn't bring up the catering I did with him because it sounds like just as bad. Almost.
So you know what's funny about that is he told that story, the 413 story, during that podcast, and we cut it out for time.
Oh, really?
And I was like, we'll deep dive into this another time, so it will arise again.
Yeah.
We got a couple questions I want to pop up here. Mark has asked us, how do you smoke cheese? Do you smoke cheese?
So I've tried it a few times. As far as I can tell, you really have to go basically no heat at all, right? I mean, how do you do?
It's a true cold smoke.
Yeah.
I mean, if I do heat, it's residual heat. I'm not shooting for heat at all.
Yeah, I've tried it before with some heat, and it just like I did it on some ice. This is when I was in culinary school, and I just remember it melting on the ice. Trying to use a cook shack, but this is like trial and error, right? Well, let's give it a shot.
That's fun.
But I think that the success I've had has been with, and you have to use the right wood because some wood can be very pungent on cheese. It's not tasty at all.
You're not going to take a piece of oak or hickory and throw it on.
Yeah, it's bitter, and the smoking guns work really good. I think the Hasty Bakes have little adapters, or what are those little can things that I guess they don't make it, but other people.
Yeah, so a company called Amazing Tubes, and we sell these here at the grill store. You can buy them online. They're dirt cheap, $20.
Yeah.
And it's basically a tube with holes in it, and you fill it full of pellets.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize this, so it's actually kind of a good education point too, is you don't want to use the same pellets that are in your grill as you use in those Amazing Tubes. And the reason being is because grill pellets are blended for heat.
Okay.
So it's a mix of hardwoods that create heat and they create smoke, so the Amazing Tubes, the pellet blends are made not on the heat side but on the smoke side. So I'll do it on my Ranger all the time, but they work, actually even better on like a full-size Legacy is I'll take that tube, I'll fill it full of the Amazing Tubes pellets that we sell. And they have, cherry blend and pecan blend, and I love their alder blend. It's a great wood to do kind of cold smoking over.
Yeah.
And I'll put it down in the firebox, no charcoal. I'll literally just open it up, drop the tube in the firebox, and light it. And then I'll put my cheese up here.
Yeah.
And I try to do it on a cold day. You really can't do it in the summer because, this thing gets a complimentary 100 extra degrees in the summer when it's in the sun. But I will do it like in the winter. Or if you got to use a block of ice or something, you can too. But I'll put that cheese up there, and it'll gather smoke. And you got to be careful with it. an hour, 2 hours at the most. I've over smoked stuff at 2.5 hours. So it just kind of depends on what you're using it for. And then I don't know about you when you've done it, with culinary school, but I found the most effective way is after you get that cheese, fight the urge to taste it because it's going to taste bitter at the time.
It takes like 5 days, right?
I give it 2 weeks.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll put it in the food saver and vacuum pack it and put it in the back of the refrigerator and put a date on it so I know what day I smoked it.
Yeah.
And come back about 2 weeks later and that smoke sinks into the cheese and the whole thing mellows.
Yeah, that's the crucial part is that wait time, but also if you have a vacuum sealer, that makes all the difference in the world as far as infusing that smoke flavor. Yeah.
Well, when you're cold smoking, there's nothing to open up the pores of the cheese initially.
Yeah.
So you really want that cheese, the smoke to drive down into the cheese over time rather than anything else. If you tried it right away, you'd get this really pungent smoke on the outside skin of the cheese, and then the inside wouldn't have anything.
And that's the problem with when you apply the heat to the process, is you start cooking those oils out, and you totally change the construction of the cheese, and the flavor and the just the texture. So it's important to kind of be careful when you're doing cheeses. And
every cheese is different too. You can go a harder cheese that's got less moisture content, like a Parmesan or something. You can do a mozzarella who's going to have a lot of moisture content to it. Yeah. It depends on what you're cooking and how you're what you're smoking and what you're doing. Mozzarella that's got a lot of moisture content, I find that it can actually take quite a bit of smoke.
Yeah.
Because it has to kind of fight that moisture content. The harder the cheese, you would think, it's going to oversmoke. It's actually, you kind of got to drive it down into it. Play around with it.
I bet that Helene would smoke really good. I've never
tried it.
From Imre, it's a local company. It's great like on a crazy hot fire, just grilling, searing over it.
Because it's so hard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, if you just try to eat it cold, it's like that squeaky sound in your teeth,
Right. Right.
But if you grill it, it's a total game
I've
changer.
I've grilled cheese. I've never grilled cheese, though.
We need to get you some of that halim, man.
It's
it's awesome.
When you get back for the podcast, we might fire up a grill that night and have some fun.
Yeah.
We do sometimes have the best job in the world when you got to cook to work, so it's not too bad, right? So had a question submitted earlier that I think is really cool. It says, how important is exact temperature when you're cooking over fire?
So are we talking about ambient temperature, or are we talking about the product?
They didn't say, so your interpretation.
Okay, so coming from a restaurant side, when I'm talking about my guys cooking steaks over the wood fire, or any fire, but if they're cooking these steaks, for me, I have a much better profit if my guys aren't overcooking things.
Yeah.
So I have them use a thermometer on every single piece of meat that they cook. I know there's old school guys out there that have got the touch, they don't need that thermometer or whatever, but for me, I needed that guarantee. So I say, hey guys, pull this steak off at this temperature, let it rest till this temperature, and then sear it off again before it hits the customer. So for me, when it comes to the steak temperature, we're talking about steaks alone here, temperature is crucial. Now, when it's talking about like doing a brisket, I would say that it's not as important as far
ambient
as the
or
I'm
internal?
talking about meat temperature.
No, either way.
I'm talking about the internal temperature of the meat. I would say that if I was doing a brisket, I'm really watching the color, and then I do use the thermometer when it comes to the time that I take it to rest.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a certain point where you have to kind of watch that. But as far as like before you wrap it, you're looking for that color. I think that's the most important thing at that point in time.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you could over smoke it or you could under smoke it, and it's about
Well,
the color.
once you wrap, you're not going to get any more color.
Right.
So that's always for me. You got a lot of people who will tell you everything is done by temperature. So take a brisket to 160 degrees and then wrap it. And the problem is, depending on how much wood has been in your fire at the time, depending on how long, if you're cooking at 200 degrees versus 275 degrees, that 160 degrees has a wide swing on what could have happened to that meat.
Yeah.
So my go-to has always been I cook it to color.
Yeah.
I find the temperature I like, and then I cook it to color.
Yeah.
And then once I cook it to color, I know it's not going to get any more color. It's not going to get any more smoke. That's when I can wrap it and take advantage of that, kind of the oven effect and the foil versus that. So, okay, so we talked internal temperature.
Yeah.
How important is ambient temperature when you're cooking over fire?
I think that this is maybe kind of an element where you get your own flair. You get to kind of do your own thing. Because what are you doing? You're creating more of a bark maybe, or more of an intense color. Sometimes people are in a hurry, and I've heard successful stories of people cooking briskets or whatever it is, much more fast than I would ever dream of cooking it.
Yeah.
I've not tasted those, so I don't know.
Right.
But I think that this is an opportunity, and it also depends on the piece of meat. It really has to. If you're cooking a brisket, the lower the temper, the better. If you're cooking a burger or a steak, you want to go pretty high temp and sear. What was the question again? As far as
how important? I guess
temperature,
how important is ambient temperature when you're
temperature?
cooking over fire?
I think that like when we're doing the Argentinian style, it's important to get in a range, because you can't judge you can hold the thermometer in the air, but it doesn't do a lot of good. It's more about getting a sense of with your hand. We always do this with the fire. We kind of get an idea of where the right heat range is, and I try to hold it there for maybe 4 or 5 seconds. And if I can, I know that we're just about the right range. It's probably like 250 or 300, something like that. I think it's pretty important. Yeah.
And I think you have to read your protein or whatever you're cooking. You have to read your food and see how the fire is reacting on your food, because at some point, depending on the size of the meat, the kind of meat, the protein, whatever it is, a hotter fire, a cooler fire may be having a different effect to it.
Yeah.
So I know I cook a lot of Santa Maria style.
Yeah.
So same thing with the hand. I mean, I go about 3 seconds on my hand, and if I'm pulling it off after 3 seconds, I know I'm around 300 degrees, which is where I like to cook things like tri-tips and Santa Maria style ribs and things like that are more open flame.
Yeah.
Because even though you're getting a direct heat at 300 degrees, it's not a convective heat. It's coming right up at it. So you're doing a lot of flipping.
Yeah.
But I know that 300 degrees has that impact on the meat, so I have to move the meat around because I can't move the fire around.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's as important, in my opinion, down to the degree. I think it's as important as how that fire is affecting, what it is. I mean, you could have a 50 or 75 degree swing, and depending on the protein, it's probably okay. There's other proteins, if you're cooking salmon, a swing from 270 or 225 to 325 could be the
Dry
difference
that
between
sucker
having
out,
salmon jerky or a nice piece of smoked
Yeah.
salmon.
You know, also I was thinking about marinades. You know, when you're cooking like a tri-tip with a heavy chili marinade on the outside, if you went really hot, you're going to just toast that thing to bits.
Right.
So you want to kind of keep it in a happy range. You don't want to go too cold either, where you have this like blonde thing at the end. You know, you want to find that right range where you're not burning that marinade, or sometimes there's a lot of sugary marinades. You have to be real careful with high temps on that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think even the moisture of a marinade can make a big difference. So not even just what's in the marinade, although a lot of people don't account for the sugar or the salt, and that has adverse effects or can. But the moisture of a marinade, smoke sticks to moisture. I tell my students this all the time when we do barbecue school is if you've ever, maybe you're camping or you're out at the lake or something, you're done with the day, you go take a shower, and then you got a bonfire or a grill or something going by, and you walk by it, and all of a sudden you realize, like, I reek of smoke. It's because your skin or your hair, something was still damp from taking a shower, being in the lake or whatever. And then that smoke just stuck right to you.
Yeah.
And I use that, to great effect when I'm doing Santa Maria style or Argentinian style or something. I try to keep that moisture around that meat because I want that smoke to stick to it. But that also has an effect over, think about how hot your skin gets when it's wet as opposed to when it's dry.
Yeah.
So fire impacts that as well. So there's a lot of aspects to it. I wouldn't be nearly as concerned with the degree that I'm cooking to as I would be how it's affecting what we're cooking.
This is when you start using your instincts.
Right. Right.
There's another method with Argentinian style that they do as far as seasoning.
Yeah.
And they use what that's called a salmuera, something like that. Anyway, it's basically a brine that while you're cooking the piece of meat, whatever it is, chicken is great, beefs are really good, but you get it at a certain temperature where those pores have opened up, and then you start splashing this brine on while it's cooking.
Okay, like a mop, like throwing a mop?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Exactly. If you watch the videos of Malman doing his thing, he's like from 3 feet away, just slinging
slow-mo video. It's really
really cool, yeah. But what's really neat about that is it does a couple things. Is that it seasons your meat because it's at the perfect stage where all these pores are open, and then the awesome thing about it is the salt crust. So all that salmuera gets slung on there, and then the water evaporates, and then the salt that's not inside the meat is now making a crust on the outside. So you almost get these layers of white on the outside of the meat. And like for a steak or something like that, it's so killer.
Well, and a lot of times, there's this nuance, so this is not in every case, but in traditional South American, Argentinian style food, you're not using heavy rubs with a million spices and everything. You're using very basic ingredients, some salt, maybe some pepper, some chili.
It's all about the meat flavor.
It's all about the meat flavor, and then whatever you need to just top it off to kind of accentuate it.
A lot of the flavors come with the chimichurris.
Yeah, for sure. What you add on kind of after the fact or what you blend with, for sure. Hey guys, while we're going, I appreciate all the comments we're getting. Ross, thanks for tuning in, buddy. If you guys can hear us, can you just throw a couple thumbs up there? This is kind of an experiment. We're masked. We got a remote mic here, so if you can hear us, give us a couple thumbs up. So
we don't want to waste
I know
your
if
time.
it's too quiet or too loud, let us know. I'll keep moving that microphone because I can't tell what's going on with it right now. Okay, next question. The purpose, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but moisture and the purpose of a water pan. So let's apply it to maybe cooking in something like a backyard grill.
I would
you ever
say
use a water pan?
I don't ever use a water pan, but I would have to assume that it's not necessarily you're adding moisture to the product. I think it's more about making the ambient surrounding humidity. Yeah, exactly. Right. So I wouldn't say that it's going to make your meat more moist, but I would say that you could slow down some caramelization and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. Creating moisture on the outside of the bark is going to slow down the bark, which in turn is actually going to allow you to get some more smoke flavor into that thing before that bark sits. It'll actually probably slow down the color that it's building too.
Yeah.
So it's a great way to kind of not regulate the heat, but regulate the effect of the heat on your meat. I think you always want to maintain some kind of humid environment on there as much as possible.
Yeah, fire is constantly dehydrating the
right.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the whole goal. I mean, one of the ways that meats cook is it evaporates all the water that's in the muscle. So you want to be able to try to impart as much moisture back into that as possible to maintain it,
Gotcha.
Or else you end up with beef jerky.
And I think the best way to not have dry meat is to not overcook it.
Yeah, that's the funny thing is, as basic as that sounds, that is one of the biggest hurdles for a standard backyard cook, an in-home cook, is it takes a long time to develop instinct.
Yeah.
And most of us although a lot of people wouldn't say, "Oh, I got great cooking instincts," I think they think that, oh, if I just count it, or I go off a timer, or I go off something in a book, like what they won't tell you when you're, you pull up a, say a Southern Living, grill book or something, and it says cook your steaks, to 2 minutes and 25 seconds aside. Well, that's great if you have the exact cut of steak, the exact fat content, the exact thickness, the exact weight.
Yeah.
Like, sure, you can. The only time that number ever comes into play is at the time that recipe was written. If that thing turned out perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know about you. I almost never cook to time as far as the initial cook. I mean, I might time the rest, or time a brine or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely when it comes to like curing and things like that, you can do pretty accurately say, okay, with this poundage of meat, this much salt will cure it, and I guess even then, if you have your salt ratio right, a meat will only take on so much salt.
Right.
So,
but you're measuring the pound on that, so at least you have some kind of science behind it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but the days usually help with that. So my bacon, I only cure for like 3 days.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm a 7-day guy on bacon.
Yeah.
But that's because I read it on Amazing Ribs. So I'm going to assume you probably have a better process than I do.
Well, I do a very simple process. They call it basic cure. It's a recipe I got from Brian Paulson.
Okay.
And it's brown sugar, salt, and nitrate salt, or
Pink
TCM.
salt.
Yeah.
Right.
And I do 3 days on there dry rub. So that's like the old school method. When you start doing this,
You bag it.
I usually I actually just lay it in a pan,
like a glass pan or something.
Glass or plastic, and flip it. About a day and a half, I'll flip it.
Right.
And,
Don't cure your meats in aluminum foil pans, by the way, guys. That's I've made that mistake.
A lot of
the
flavor
first time I did
comes
it,
off
that's you walk into a refrigerator full of cure on the bottom.
Aluminum has very specific uses in the kitchen, and stick to those purposes.
Yeah, for sure. It's not a carry-all.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. Okay, so I had a question come in. What is the best brine? A lot of people use beer and fruit juices. Is it water and salt? Does it depend on the protein?
I think it depends on, a couple things. Protein being one of them, but also what are you cooking? Like, what is the origin of this recipe? Are you coming from somewhere in Spain, or is it from somewhere in the Orient? Like, what is it you're cooking? Because it would be weird to use a wine in a Asian cooking maybe or something. I'm trying to think. Well, I guess they use rice wines, but I'm trying to think. Basically, it applies to the recipe and the region it's coming from. I try to think like that when I'm writing recipes. Is this a Mexican flavor, or is this a European flavor, and things like that. I think it has a lot to do with that. Yeah. Exactly. But what do you think?
Truthfully, I don't brine very often. I probably could brine more. I'm a little bit more of a lazy cook when it comes to, and I mean that in the way that I don't always plan out. If I'm cooking a whole hog, you bet I'm going to brine it, in a cooler for, at least overnight, if not longer. If I'm doing a bunch of pork chops or something where I know, hey, people are coming over and I'm cooking, 15 of these things, I'm planning that ahead of time, so maybe I'll do a brine.
Pork really benefits from brine.
Pork really does. Chickens and turkeys do quite a bit, especially if you're buying store-bought, kind of factory farm-raised birds. You don't quite need it as much when you're buying the ones that are a little bit more local raised, just because of what they put into the birds and how the diet that they have and the exercise that they have and everything else. Like the muscles are different, but a lot of times when you buy something, pork or chicken from the store, it's been injected with a salt solution anyway, so it's not going to take a lot of your
Especially
brine.
The ones that come in the vacuum sealed bags.
Oh yeah,
those are swimming in juices.
Well, and part of that's for they want it to taste juicier, and part of it is because of weight. They want to up the weight for the bag because you're paying per pound.
Yeah.
So I don't typically brine unless it's in kind of in that environment, but I normally do a basic brine. A salt, brown sugar, some oranges, some cloves, maybe some cinnamon, depending on what I'm doing. I'll do more of a wet marinade, like a overtime marinade with wine or something like that every now and then. I love. There's a recipe. I'm going to give this away because I don't use this in catering, so I feel like I can. If you ever just want to have some fun, there is a restaurant. It's actually a meat market in California, and they make a wet marinade in their tri-tip, and they sell their tri-tips, and they call this thing Cardiff Crack. So from Cardiff, California, And it's if you Google that, I'm sure you can find the recipe for it. But it uses like I forget if it's a Cabernet or a Pinot Noir, heavy wine base, and then a bunch of other stuff that goes in, and they marinate tri-tip in it like overnight. You end up using like a bottle or two of wine, so it's not a cheap marinade, by any. Maybe that's what you use your boxed wine for.
Yeah.
But that's a great marinade. It really drives that wine down in, and the tannins and everything in the wine do a good job of breaking it down.
Does it make it kind of purple colored?
It stains the meat very dark purple.
Yeah.
It adds, it crusts up really well because of the sugar that's in the
yeah.
wine. The tannins do a good job of kind of breaking down the meat. And, tri-tip, we've talked about this in the past, is already traditionally a little bit of a tougher cut if you don't tenderize or salt bath or sous vide or do something like that with it. So it's a great option for that.
Yeah.
Brian Kimball wants to know if you can smoke taquitos and Hot Pockets. I mean, you probably could.
Yeah, you could totally do it.
So yeah, but that's an example of kind of, I guess it wouldn't be a traditional brine depending on the salt content, but it's kind of a lot of people use brine and wet marinade interchangeably. You're not going to brine in orange juice.
No.
Brine by definition is going to be briny, so it's going to contain a salt.
Yeah. Although like pork loves fruit juices.
Yeah.
And so you can, and I've done this a lot, where you put most of the way with a cider or something, and then the rest of the way with your brine, but you also use the cider ratio for the salt. So I think that's one thing that really works well with brining is, pork. I keep going back to pork too, and poultry, because they do gain a lot from
that
the
wider
process.
meat. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Every now and then I will, and not necessarily on the brine, although some on the brine. My wife will call me and she'll say like, "Hey, I really want to do fajitas for dinner or something." I don't have time to run down to the Mexican market and get, the pre-marinated stuff.
Yeah, if you're ever going to
ours is great.
Just if you're going to make fajitas, just don't bother. Just go to the store, the Las Americas or wherever, or the what's the other one over there at 51st?
Oh yeah. Morenos, yeah.
Yeah, just go to the counter and get the red stuff. It doesn't matter, pork, beef, whatever.
I'm telling you, people have perfected this over decades and decades, and I promise you it'll be better than yours.
Yeah.
But if you can't,
Yeah.
sometimes what I'll do is I'll swing by the store. So we use it up anyway, so it's not really a waste. But I'll swing by the store. I'll get some skirt steak. I'll get like a thing of Tampico or Sunny D or something like that. I'll get some fajita marinade. I'll get some Worcestershire sauce, or some soy sauce is great in fajita marinade. And then I'll get a pack of Ziploc bags, and in the parking lot, in the back seat of my truck, I'll mix up that marinated bag and everything. So I got a 30-minute drive home. I'm at least getting a 30-minute marinade on my fajitas.
I spent my 17 and 18-year-old part of my life when I was in high school. My second job actually was at a restaurant called Cafe Santa Fe in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and we cooked just like pounds and pounds and pounds of fajitas. And it was marinated, but then also another crucial point with getting that flavor and with that fajita flavor that you like at the Mexican restaurants is while they're sauteing it, they hit it with this, and they call it deglazing, right?
Right.
So they hit it with this mixture, and ours was like in one of those speed pour bottles that a bartender uses. Would be white vinegar and garlic powder, onion powder, dry oregano, and like chili spices, and maybe some cumin in there.
Right.
And just before, when you're about halfway through, you shake it up and hit it on there. Do it on the vegetables too, and when you mix it all together, and that gives it that acidity that you kind of think what you think of when you eat a fajita.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's crucial. Yeah.
That's awesome. I bet the deglaze has a good effect on it too.
Yeah.
Just using that vinegar to deglaze with it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Favorite kind of smoking wood and why?
So I'm a country boy, and we cut firewood at my house, and I grew up doing that. And so
couldn't tell with the overalls.
Yeah. We just cut oak off the property, and I have 30 acres out on Keystone, and so we have so much wood. And to buy wood to me would be like, if I told my dad I bought some wood, he would laugh in my face. So I cut oak or hickory. We have a lot of hickory on the property, and it's even some persimmon. So for me, it's what's on the property, what I got. If somebody says, "Hey man, I got a pecan tree, I'd love to come," I'll go get some of that, or apple or whatever.
Right.
I don't know if I have a favorite, but I suppose the oak is great. That's what the Texas guy uses. They use that particular. I don't know which kind of oak it is, but
Central Texas uses a lot of post oak,
Yeah.
live oak. Barbecue in general. If you guys have taken any of our classes, and what we kind of, hype on this a little bit, but barbecue in general, the region the reason you have regional barbecue is partially because of the flavors of the culture that's there, and partially because of the wood that's available.
Yeah.
So Texas barbecue is heavy on oak. In certain areas, heavy on mesquite. You get into eastern Texas, you get more hickory. North Carolina barbecue is a lot of hickory. Oklahoma barbecue is a lot of oak and pecan.
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends on the region you're in. I do like to change up my wood a little bit, especially when I'm doing a backyard, cooker like this Legacy that's behind me. Depending on what I'm doing, so I almost always use some kind of blended pecan.
Yeah.
Have it readily available here. And it's a really good, a little bit sweeter, a little bit lighter wood than an oak smoke. So it's more forgiving.
Yeah.
I like to throw some fruit wood in, especially if I'm doing something like ribs or chicken or fish or.
I found some. I was at Academy, like all of us do probably when you're at Academy, just kind of like looking around at everything.
Wall.
Yeah. But I found like a bag of orange wood, and I was like, that is crazy.
We sell that here too. I've never tried it though.
I don't know what to do with it, but I'm gonna do something with it, I guess.
I know some people that use some really strange, like hedge wood sometimes,
Yeah.
or crab apple, like stuff like that. That's just I don't know how healthy that is.
I guess you could think about where orange wood would come from, and so you start thinking about tropical climates. Well, what kind of food do they do there?
Right.
Fajitas, maybe that would be good on fajitas.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know. Cuban sandwich.
It's fun. I mean, in theory, almost without exception, I have to preface it by saying almost any fruit or nut wood is going to be decent to smoke with.
Yeah.
Walnut is an exception to that. There's some noxious content in walnut, but in general, any fruit or nut wood is good. It just depends. I mean, experiment with it. Fruit wood can be you can over smoke with fruit wood really easy.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's a harder wood. So it puts off quite a bit of smoke. So I like to kind of do a little blend every now and then.
I've actually noticed on the Hasty Bake group, there's some guys that are like, they don't know whether to say, hey, this guy or my property had a limb go down. Can I use this? Is that safe or something? And
Right.
I'm like, of course, but you want to make sure that you kind of let it, I think, cure a little bit. If you go putting a piece of green wood on the fire, it's not going to be pleasant.
Yeah, I mean the guys that we know, Aaron Franklin will tell you that he uses green wood every now and then.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those when you pump through that much wood, you can't guarantee everything is going to be seasoned, 18 months like we would all enjoy it. So I think he said maybe 20% green wood, and he mixes it in so that it kind of offsets it. But yeah, the cure on the wood, the seasoning on the wood is going to make a really big difference. We had a question from Brian. He says, I'm new to smoking, getting my first Hasty Bake soon. Is there a type of wood that's the best all around? I mean, I think we kind of talked on that. Oak is a good one. Pecan is a good one. Hickory is a good one. Hickory's a little stronger, so if you don't mind a good amount of smoke. But those three are a great base wood to start with. Yeah. And then start experimenting from there. The good thing about, and it is kiln drying, and I'd rather have non-kiln drying wood, but almost any place that sells barbecue, stuff, something like the Tulsa Grill Store, an Academy Sports, an Ace Hardware, even a Home Depot, you can normally find kiln-dried small bags of wood chunks. I always recommend chunks, but don't use chips just because the chips burn up so quick. If you soak them, you're steaming, you're not actually smoking as much. Yeah. But you can buy a small bag to just kind of experiment around with and see if you like the flavor.
Yeah.
Do a couple more here. I don't want to go too long, but is the rest a myth or fact?
It's a fact.
It's a fact.
I think so, right?
Talk about it.
You're talking about the rest of the
resting
meat?
your meat.
Yeah. If you were to take a brisket off the grill at 210 degrees and slice right into it, you have just wasted all that time and effort that you put into it, because you're going to watch all the moisture and water and juiciness of your brisket just wash out of that thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's incredibly important.
Yeah. It's just like if I lit a fire and I had you put your hand over that fire, you're going to want to pull your hand back when your hand gets too hot. The juices and the moisture in meat do the same thing when the outside of the meat gets hot. They all run to the middle of the meat. Yeah. And they run to it in the channels that are created, and as the fat renders out, that intermuscular fat kind of highway is where all those juices run to the middle of the meat. And as soon as you take it off the fire and that temperature starts to lower, that juice now has the ability to kind of follow the path it came in and redistribute. So just like you said, you can cut that, tri-tip or that brisket or whatever on that board, and look at all the juices running. You're thinking, look how juicy that is, and I'm thinking, look how juicy that was until you cut it. So the rest, in our opinion, is an absolute fact. You could debate till the day is long how long the rest needs to be. I think it depends on the weight of the meat.
Yeah, that's true.
And the temperature it was cooked at.
Yeah.
I know some competition guys. I don't recommend this because I couldn't tell you in detail all the steps they follow, but I know some competition guys that will start a brisket at like 450 degrees, which is way hotter than you would ever normally start a brisket at. And they'll crank that cooker up, put it on at 450 degrees, and they'll let that temperature fall. Won't try to add any wood, won't try to add any heat, won't do anything. And they'll let that temperature fall gradually until it gets about 225 degrees.
Wow.
And then they will wrap that meat up, and they rest it for like 7 hours. And what their process is I'm going to pound that meat with heat, get all those juices inside, try to get it cooked real quick, and then use the rest as the second half of my cooking time. And because it was so hot initially, like that meat's going to stay hot when it's wrapped up. I don't know all the timeline and the details, so you'd have to experiment and probably burn up some good amount of meat to do it.
Yeah.
There's a reason, obviously, some guys would do that, but you can use that rest to great advantage depending on what you're cooking. But you can rest a steak 5 or 8 minutes and make a huge difference. You can rest a brisket. My brisket go-to rest is about 3 hours.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, I think it's something to consider too. Like I don't know if you ever had somebody make you a pot roast, or you ate dinner at somebody's house and they made a pot roast. And that pot roast can sometimes be dry. When you're thinking, how can you overcook a pot roast?
It's in liquid the whole time.
Exactly. Right. But the biggest factor is that when they're letting that rest, you still have to rest a pot roast. And you don't want to cut into it immediately. You want to make sure it stays in the braising liquid while it comes down to temp. That's crucial. Is if you were to take that out and then make a gravy, or do something with the vegetables here or there that you braised in, you're now taking moisture. You're letting that fall. Just removing it from the braising liquid will make it dry now.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you cut into it or not. So
and some people add it back into the braising liquid after they've mixed it up,
the damage
and
might
you're
be done.
in liquid and it still tastes dry.
Yeah. It's important that pot roast really. I know that's very specific, but some people do pot roast on the Hasty Bake very successfully, and it's delicious. Or even that I did some short ribs in a Dr. Pepper braise.
Ooh, yum.
It was awesome. But if I were just to take those suckers out of there, and actually I did. So here's how I did that: is I pureed the braising liquid and broth, but I did it as fast as possible, and I got the meat back into it as fast as possible.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's use that rest to your advantage. Hey guys that are watching, welcome everybody. Adam Green, buddy, we need to get you on. We're gonna continue to do these Pitmaster Q&A segments. I think you're gonna have to be the next guy. We're gonna yank you in here, bud, because this guy is a fountain of knowledge.
I still haven't been up there, but I have heard nothing but amazing things about Max.
It's some of the best barbecue in Oklahoma.
I mean, the pictures look awesome.
They really do a good job up there. They care about everything they're putting out.
Yeah.
I can't.
He's got all the right people. Like I can tell he's good because everybody that I know that does good barbecue loves him.
For sure. So. Yeah, absolutely. It's fun watching that crowd do their thing.
Yeah.
All right, a couple more questions here. How do you make sure your fire is burning clean? So this applies to this. It also applies to kind of the Argentinian style stuff that you like to cook.
Yeah, I think that the green wood thing is something to consider because that's going to create a lot of the sugars and oils in the wood that are going to be smoking that dark color smoke. Mm-hmm. You don't want to do too much wood. That's the beautiful thing about the charcoal method. When you put the little blocks on there, is that you can really control the amount of smoke being put off. Charcoal is clean, right? And
in theory,
yeah, exactly.
You're buying the right stuff.
Okay, there you go.
But yes,
yeah. So I think that the amount of wood on there, if you put a lot of wood on there, you're going to cook less time probably.
Yep.
If you put a little bit of wood on there, just apply that flavor slowly, you're going to have a cleaner fire.
Absolutely. Thing to remember with fire is it's made up of three things. It's made up of air, oxygen, it's made up of fuel, and it's made up of heat. So a lot of times what will happen, especially in a backyard cooker environment, is you'll be depriving, without even knowing it, you're depriving your fire of one of the three things that it needs to succeed. So you can't get your heat up. 9 times out of 10, you're probably choking your fire out and don't have enough oxygen in it. You burn in a really, really dirty fire, which is kind of what the question was talking about, how do I make sure it's burning clean? If it's continually pumping out smoke, what you've probably done is provided enough oxygen, but probably provided too much fuel because everything needs to be in balance. So, and the too much fuel thing, you kind of get caught in the middle on that because too much fuel can create too much heat.
Yeah.
But too much fuel can actually cut down on the amount of oxygen available to create that balance too. So a lot of times what people do is they'll throw a bunch of wood or a bunch of charcoal on an already burning fire, and they'll snuff out that fire because there's not enough oxygen for that fire to get up and do its thing.
Yeah.
So it's all about kind of creating a balance, and as cheesy as it sounds, like I like to call it kind of a dance, because you have to interpret what it's doing and then pivot and change what you're doing based on that. So how do you burn a clean fire? I mean, start off with making sure that the coal bed or whatever your fuel source is set up correctly. Make sure that it's not full of a bunch of powder from the bottom of your charcoal bag that's just going to snuff it out. Make sure it's not full of a bunch of really big pieces that are going to have a hard time igniting. So you kind of want to have a good mix of stuff in there. As you're adding wood, don't add so much wood that you're going to be burning straight wood and kind of choking it out. There's a little bit of a balance, a little bit of a finesse that you have to create there. But 9 times out of 10, if you're worried that you're burning a dirty fire, you probably are. And it's probably an oxygen thing. And then you have to balance out, if I give it more oxygen, it's going to rise the heat up, right? So now you learn your drill and you figure how to give it more oxygen and not raise the heat. A good trick on these hasty bakes, if you're burning kind of a smokier fire, is you open up your vents a little bit to give it a little bit more oxygen, or if you're on the front end of a cook, go ahead and crack that lid up a little bit for maybe 30 seconds to a minute and let it flood oxygen down into the cooker.
I've done that a lot. Just put a little rock there.
Yeah, we call it the turbo method.
Yeah.
Get a rock or a chip or something, even an edge of a spatula, and crack that thing. I mean, 1/8 of an inch will make a big difference.
Yeah.
But then sometimes to combat the heat, what I'll do is I'll bring that air in, but I'll go ahead and lower my firebox a little bit, so now I'm not giving it quite as much room to suck that air in. The air's there, but it's not going to draft quite as quick, so it slows that fire down and kind of burns and combusts more completely.
Yeah.
That's in my mind how you kind of start to burn a little bit cleaner. Any other questions today? I think we've been going here for about half an hour, so we're probably going to wrap up. Last call for questions on that. I'm looking through. I think we got everything answered.
Were we good on sound? Did you get some thumbs up?
We got some thumbs up. Everyone said they could hear us fine, so I think this is a good little setup for
Right on.
doing this in the future. Anything else you want to let people know?
I don't think so.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, thanks for being here, guys. Thanks for tuning in at lunch hour on a Wednesday. We're going to sprinkle these in, between our What's Cooking Wednesday recipe videos and everything else we do. We are going to do a fun live this Friday for Memorial Day. We're doing a side cook that a lot of people haven't tried before. I'm not going to give the whole thing away, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So tune in around the lunch hour or so on Wednesday to catch that. Follow us and subscribe in all the places you want to do. Check out YouTube. We'll be putting this up. It's on Facebook Live right now, but we'll be putting this thing up on YouTube here in a little bit. Subscribe on YouTube too, because you get the notifications when those kind of come in. And then also check out Fire and Grain Podcast, the podcast Tasty Bake. Just launched in partnership with 1907 Barbecue in Town. We've been having a lot of fun week over week on that. Kevin will be on that here in the next couple weeks, telling some fun stories, and let that truck go by.
We should invite him.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us, guys, and we'll see you soon. Have a good week.